Good morning. Today is November 14th. Time is 8:30. And I call this meeting of the Elliott State Research Forest Board of Directors to order. Board members, as your names are called, please say present. Are you calling? I'll look around. Is there anybody that is missing? Everybody's here. We have a quorum. In fact, we have a full board. Before we move in today's agenda, I'd like to take a moment for introductions of our newest Elliott board member, Ken Carloni of Roseburg, Oregon, and our newest staff member, research coordinator, Ryan Bombush. And Ken and Ryan, I'm going to give you a few moments to introduce yourself to the world in this room, which is small, and the world that is online, which might be larger, and give us a bit of your history. There we go.
I'm Ken Carloni, and I spent 31 years teaching biology and natural resources classes at Umpqua Community College. And since I've retired, I've been managing a 380-acre landscape in southern Douglas County as a nonprofit with the goal of conservation, restoration, education, and recreation. And my current research interest is in biochar, production of biochar, and the use of biochar to solve environmental problems. So that's me.
Ryan?
Hi, I am Ryan Bombush. I'm the newly hired research coordinator for the Elliott State Research Forest. I'm a wildlife biologist by training. I earned my PhD from Oregon State University, master's and undergrad from Humboldt State University. Much of my experience has been working with northern spotted owl and barred owl research in the Pacific Northwest. I've also worked with marbled murrelets and a variety of other species, and really excited about all the opportunity there is in the Elliott.
Thanks, Ryan. And Ryan brings the Elliott team up to 7 full-time staff, including Hannah Beveridge, who's a shared position with the broader land management division at DSL. And Hannah, did you get an opportunity at a previous meeting to introduce yourself? You did. Okay. And we won't ask for a repeat. Before we review today's agenda, I'd like to direct the board's attention to the minutes from our last meeting, which were circulated in advance or included in your meeting packet. Please take a moment to review the minutes if you have not already done so. Are there any corrections or edits that need to be made to the minutes as presented? Yeah, Peter?
My theme for Mr. Kennedy has grown even higher, that he read all the way to the end of the minutes and actually found something that was a mistake. So if you look at the bottom of page 49, it has Peter Hayes shared that approving the process will help to foster a culture that attracts, and attains should be retains. And I think what my meaning would have been was quality board members, and strike the rest. I wasn't really, I don't think, saying anything about burnout. So if I would propose those changes, if that's okay.
Okay.
And thank you.
Any other corrections or additions to the minutes of the previous meeting? Take a motion. I entertain a motion to approve the minutes as amended of the September 10 meeting.
So moved.
And seconded? There we go. A motion and a second. Any further questions? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Minutes are approved. Off to slide, which is our agenda. Today's agenda, Emma, do you wish to do this? Go ahead.
Today's agenda begins with 15 minutes of public comment. We're starting with public comment today just because we've found ourselves out of sync a couple times. So we're trying something new. And then after those 15 minutes of public comment, we'll do staff updates on forest operations, carbon project, and research. And then we'll move into board business, where vice chair and chair will outline roles, and the appointment process for those positions. Following that item, our discussion items include review of the 25-27 after action review report for our 25-27 BOP, Biennial Operations Plan, now known as our Forest Operations Plan, FOP. After that, we'll recap our 2025 retreat, which we just wrapped up last night. We'll close this meeting with a recap of our action items and any assigned follow-up items, and we'll look to the board to identify any action items at that time. And with that, I think we can move into public comment if anyone has any questions or anything to add.
If you do, public, please remember we have a 5-minute limit. Identify yourself by name and affiliation, if you would as well. Seeing no members of the public who've jumped in, correct? I believe. Fergus,
Yes. Greetings.
there you are. Please, yeah, identify yourself once again, affiliation.
I'm Fergus McLean, a retired forester. My family has property immediately across the Umpqua River from the northeast corner of the Elliott, on a location of Lower Scottsburg, which was wiped out by the 1864 flood, the time that there were 4,000 residents there in the first printing press in Western Oregon. Today, I'm very delighted to thank Ken Carloni for joining your group, which is really, you guys are an incredible team. My comments today are regarding marketing, really, but just as an aside, I had the opportunity to speak with Klaus Putman, who is the main author of the Triad philosophy on the Elliott. So at some point, I'd be happy to discuss that with a board or a committee or whoever. But today, I'd just like to suggest that the board might consider thinking ahead to what are you going to have on the ground to show for the first year's production in the forest, which would mean the sort of approach that I proposed in my BOP or FOP comments about doing simple comparisons between extensive and intensive practices in a way that is accessible to the public. I think one thing that's been a source of confusion on the forest is there are two kinds of research really that you guys need to think about. One is ecological research like Matt Betts and Gordon Reeves are doing, but the other is operational research. And such as the questions raised by Dan Newton in his financial analysis, questioning some of the recommended practices in the forest operating plan. But for simplicity's sake, if you think about where are you going to take the touring legislatures, or maybe where are you going to take the school children next year out on the forest, show them what you're doing and why in a way that's comprehensive, which is really not difficult. I outlined some suggestions in my BOP comments, and I know Eric Farm had a suggestion about one of the larger stands, I think in the headwaters of the Millicoma, where it's fairly easy terrain and you could divide it up into half a dozen different blocks and do different treatment protocols. And this is accessible by
Fergus, you're
trail. I think this would.
Fergus, that's 3 minutes. We can give you one
Yes.
more minute.
That's 3 minutes. So we can give you 4 minutes.
Thanks, Emma. That's my suggestion. You think just to think about what are you going to have to show next year to show people that the Elliott Forest is doing something.
Still there, Fergus? we've lost you. Okay, well, let's move on. I think, see if there are any other public comments, and given an opportunity, we'll give Fergus the remaining portion of his time back if he'd like to finish his comments, when we unfreeze. Any other members of the public? Okay, seeing none. Let's move on then. And next set on the agenda is updates and announcements. And we have DSL staff updates and status of prior action items. And Caitlin, I think you're up.
Good morning, I'm Caitlin Athern. And I'm here today, I'm the forester on the Elliott State Research Forest, and I'm here today to give an update on the forest operations. So just to kind of recap, the biennial operations plan, our forest operations plan that you all recommended, contained 2,300 acres of candidate stands. Eric Farm and Ryan Singleton made sure that these stands were low controversy, low risk, and not going to affect the researchers' full watersheds. So they are in some of the partial watersheds under 65 years old as of 2020. They include all 3 treatment types. The projects exclude the riparian conservation areas, and they're grouped as operationally feasible. So since we've come up with those candidate stands, I've been busy planning how we're going to accomplish all this in the 2-year operations period. So I've grouped all these stands into 7 different sale areas, and I group them spatially close to each other. And this is to reduce the cost of move in, move out for the operators, reduces the amount of road they have to maintain and upkeep. And it also reduces the time it takes them to get their equipment in and out. I've also grouped these to be around 300 acres, and that size is a kind of a Goldilocks zone for a 3-year contract, because there's only a certain amount of days during the year that operators can work. They don't work on the holidays or the weekends, and then there's also seasonal restrictions with some of our species. So the size of these are designed to be operationally feasible and also big enough volume-wise to be attractive to purchasers. And so when I'm looking at these,
Caitlin, apology, a question. So of the 7 different stand areas, each was about 300 acres. Is that what you're saying?
yes, except for the last grouping I have is a larger 600 to 700 acre area, which we could split into 2 sales later on.
Thank you.
And so what I've been working on is getting silvicultural prescriptions for these stands, and so we're having a plan. And I know we all come from different experience and understanding of forestry and silviculture. So I thought I would just kind of give you a little update on what that is. And I've included on the slide here, oh, you can't see it really. I thought this was going to be bigger. Top right corner, there's a triangle with words you can't read, but it says structure, composition, and density. And so those are kind of the 3 aspects of forest stands that we can manipulate to achieve our desired future condition. And our desired future condition for those stands really comes from our management direction and our objectives and goals. And those come from our forest management plan. So our management direction comes from the Oregon Forest Practices Act, then the Habitat Conservation Plan, and the Forest Management Plan. And so the silviculture prescriptions look at what are those objectives for extensive versus intensive versus restoration thinning. We look at the current conditions. What is the current stand density? What is the current structure? what is the current composition. And then we look, how do we go from there to the desired future condition? And that's the prescription, which is which trees you're going to leave, which trees you're going to take, how much density are you going to leave behind. And that all depends on those objectives, which our forest management plan has a lot of good goals and objectives laid out for me to work with. Another thing I'm thinking about is the monitoring and future treatments in that plan, in that prescription. So monitoring, after harvest, what are we going to be looking at and what are we going to be monitoring? And that's going to be invasives, deadwood, what trees are regenerating on their own so we can make informed decisions on how to move forward with that stand. And then future treatments are, what are we going to plant after? How are we going to treat the slash? How are we going to treat fuels? How are we going to treat invasives or brush? If there's going to be a lot of brush we have to release. So the prescription really encompasses the whole life cycle of that stand. So that's sort of what I've been making sure to have a good plan before moving forward and into logging feasibility and layout. The pictures on our slide are a little small, which I'm sorry about, but you can see there's some painted trees in there. And I just wanted you guys to be able to see kind of real life, like what is it that we're doing with layout. And so all these stands and units need to have boundary painted on the ground. We're not just using a georeferenced Avenza map. I mean, we would love to do that, but GPS doesn't work so great under dense canopy and in steep terrain. So it's easier for the operators and us to really know where that boundary is on the ground. And that's the majority of the work that needs to be physically done on the ground. And so we've hired, I can't do it all myself. I'd love to. I love being out there, but I've got a lot of things to figure out and plan for the next FOP and all the planning in general. So we have hired a contractor, and they're going to start on the 1st of December on getting all of these. They're going to lay out 1,600 acres of the 2,600 acres that we have planned for this 2-year biennium. And they're going to paint the boundaries. They're going to do 500 acres of individual tree mark. And this is kind of a sample. Like some of these units are going to be marked. Some of them are going to be just described to the purchaser on which trees to cut. And then they're also going to be doing some cruising as well. And their work will be the majority of what work needs to be done on the ground there. And then another piece of that is we have a couple of people I've been training to help out with some of that other area, and we're hoping to get some more help on that as well. One of the you can't really see it, the right bottom picture, I have 3 trees there marked with orange, and that's the leaf tree color I've chosen for the forest. And I picked this to just show you kind of what a dispersed aggregate of cool trees left behind to increase the composition of Western hemlock, which is very little in that stand at this point, and there's some of the larger trees. So it's really increasing that composition and that structure in that stand, in that future stand. Another thing there is the blue mark with an E. That's a mark of our equipment limitation zone. By law, that doesn't need to be boundaried out, but it's helpful for the contractor to know where we've both decided where that begins, so we can look at that later. And then I added some of the signs that we've made. It's just fun and exciting doing a new program where, some of the things you're used to just having, we have to make ourselves. So it's just a little glimpse into what I've been working on with all that. And then as we move forward, I'm looking at the other projects. I've just started looking at the Baldy Butte communication site to see what needs to be done there for fuels and removal of trees around that communication tower. Starting to think about the next forest operations plan, which I hope to get some input from you all at some point on. And starting to develop our reforestation and silviculture program. With that, I'll ask if you guys have any questions. Go ahead, Ken.
I know the BOP has the maps of the individual units in it, but there's no, at least I didn't see one, a map of the overall layout of those units. And it would be sort of nice to see how they're laid out across the landscape.
Yeah, I've been thinking about that, and I printed out some things and brought them, but I don't have that actual map with me. I do have a copy on my phone. I could show you, but maybe in the future meeting, I could add that as a slide.
Can you email that to us all as well? Can you, a slide like that?
And I imagine,
Yes.
I imagine the public would maybe like to see that too. So if that could go up on the Elliott website, so that folks can see where the sales are. If that's not too difficult.
Yeah, we can look into that. I'm not sure how we're gonna be presenting stuff on the website, what our protocol is gonna be.
Can jump in. This is Darren Gooding, the manager. Yeah, that's one of the things one of those things is we're still ramping up is trying to figure out, we have some work that's obviously to do on our website and some of that public facing information. And so that would be something we would take a look at about how we're going to present that.
Thanks. Haley?
At one of our last meetings, we talked about kind of the RFP process for procuring contractors, and we had a conversation as a board of trying to make sure our local contractors were really aware of those opportunities and how to work through the state system. Can you just talk a little bit about how that process went? Was there a lot of interest? Was it highly competitive? What contractor did you all select? Where are they from? Just some of that kind of economic information.
Yeah, and to be clear, these the contractor layout is quite different than what the timber contracts are going to be. Just some people weren't clear on that before, but so it goes out on organ buys, and you have to be subscribed or whatever it is to organ buys. And so I got some names of contractors from Eric Farm who we, let them know that we were putting this contract out. And then anybody who's on organ buys gets the notification as well. We had a procurement, kind of a scoring guide that had to do with past previous experience, cost, and the quality of their proposal. And so it did not have a local in that scoring guide, but that can be changed in the future. Like we weren't super. I think that scoring guide can be adjusted to fit our needs more in the future, so it can work with the contracting folks to recruit the right local people. We did the contractor that got it is from Philomath, or they're local-ish, but nobody closer. There was Buck Creek was from a little further north coast, but there wasn't anybody who went for it from the direct area.
Just as long as we're making, it's, the information is available and we actually reach out to the local, would be great.
Yeah.
I think our conversation was around, well, we were talking about, can you even have local preference in procurement? And it was something that Melissa, you and I were bringing up in the last meeting. And then also there was a conversation about maybe, and I think it is probably likely more applicable when you're getting to the actual sales portion, but just making sure that, we talked about maybe doing some educational, like the organ buys program, and making sure that contractors know and are signed up, and making sure that we're kind of hitting those smaller folks who might not be used to that system, just to encourage as much as possible.
Yeah, I would like to work on that as well. There's a lot there I don't know yet about how that works, and also who's existing around. So it'd be good to look into that. Thank you.
Caitlin, one question on those. Go, I'm sorry, Mike. Go
Oh,
ahead.
no. So question, say the contractor will start doing layout on December 1st. How long do they have to complete that? And then after that, when would you expect the first timber sales to be advertised?
Great question. So we have a tentative schedule that we agreed to. I don't have it right here, but we're shooting for end of February for the layout to be done. But since the process took a little longer than we thought during the RFP process, they've asked that, they could go into March for that, but they're going to try to get it done at the end of February. So we can't, I can do a lot of the sale package and appraisal and all that stuff while they're doing that. So as soon as they're done with boundary work and skips and gaps and all those things, it should be pretty quick to get the sale package ready for offering. So around March, hopefully.
Any other questions?
And I have two questions. And first, thanks for sharing this, and it's super exciting to see it moving forward. And clearly, you're jazzed, and getting the show on the road is a super important thing. So thank you. And
Yeah.
And my questions both have to do with in the intensive areas. Can you describe to us, or do you know what the minimum level of ecological function after the cut will be? And is the floor the State Forest Practices Act, or if we're somewhere other than the Forest Practices Act, what are you thinking in terms of how intensive it is intensive?
Yeah, so the forest management plan says to follow the Oregon Forest Practices Act or more. So the minimum for retention in Oregon forest practices is 2 wildlife trees per acre. That could be 2 live trees or snags. My intention is to leave all snags as practicable through the contract, which is pretty normal for timber contracts. And then additionally leave 2 green trees per acre at the minimum. And what I want to be careful of is to not turn the intensives into ecological units by leaving too much retention. But it is going to depend on what is out there. And if there is a lot of cedar, maybe I leave all the cedar and that becomes maybe 4 trees per acre or something like that. But we do want to make sure that it is comparable to what intensive around is doing, because we want to be able to compare our other treatments to it.
Okay, great. And my second question, which I don't assume you have the answer to, but eventually it'd be interesting to know, is, and I've asked several DSL staff this, is on Department of Forestry land, on the state forest, the minimum floor is not the Forest Practices Act. It's higher than that, and it's driven by the legal language, which is about the greatest permanent value.
Okay.
So there's a higher standard than the minimum of the law. And my question that, again, I don't expect you to have this on the tip of your tongue, would be great for the board to hear this, would be, is there any similar parallel expectation that's higher than, or maybe it's the same as the Forest Practices Act that applies to any PSL? I'd ask this about this and others. Down the road, hearing an answer to that would be great.
Yeah, that's something I will look into, and that is something I want to look into for intensive units is how is everybody doing it, so that we can be comparable.
Yeah, thank you.
Further questions? Seeing none. Anything else to add, Caitlin?
Just thank you everybody for your attention to this.
Okay. Excellent. Fergus, did you? Nope. Did he? Who was that? Chris? Got a hand raised, yours?
Yeah, hi, Keith. So that, it has been great to see you this week. Let me see if I can lower my hand now. I just want to say that Caitlin and Darren are doing a great job with this forest operations, trying to get things moving. Just to give everyone a little background on how we're organized too. As you see, y'all are intimately familiar with the Elliott team, and it's grown a little bit. But when it comes to, as you notice, we don't have a procurement specialist just for the Elliott. We don't have a project manager just for the Elliott. So that's just all part of shared services at the department. We have a couple of procurement specialists, but they do everything for the whole agency. So I think Caitlin's done a great job working with that team. I know she mentioned that we're maybe hoping to get that layout down a little earlier than February, but just want to know that it's everything's in the queue with the rest of the procurement requests from across the agency. So just wanted to note that. So thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Okay, next item under updates and announcements is Darren's, and that's about the carbon project.
Good morning, everybody. Darren Gooding, the Elliott State Research Force Manager. So not a whole lot of new information to report about the carbon project from probably the last time we talked about it, the last meeting update. Just as a refresher, since this summer, I had put out an RFP for contractors for the forest inventory portion for the carbon project. The original, when they put out the first RFP, they didn't get any takers, so they had to go back out again and do some more outreach. We also did get some people back that again, the bids were a bit higher than expected, and so they've kind of done a little bit more spatial analysis and kind of adjusted what the potential number of plots needed. And now they've put that back out, and they just now, my latest information from last week was that they're in the process of reviewing those most recent bids needed for the project. And so I'm just waiting to hear if they were successful in getting someone that was actually wanting to do the work. As long as that happens, they get someone on in the very near future, they're still on track to have that the data delivery from that collection effort by next spring of 26, which still keeps us on schedule for what they have penciled out on their plan for having credit issuance be potentially in plan for 2027. So that's kind of unfortunately, I don't have a whole lot more to add other than that. That's kind of, we're still in that stage of that inventory stage, and there's a few other steps. I'll throw in a couple things here. So just a little bit about the steps in the process here. So they're working on the forest inventory. They need to do a little bit of, do some more modeling that's done once that information is collected. They have to do there's initial third-party verification and some other things that happen along that step of the way before we get to the point where there's that actual looking at credit issuance in 2027. So more things to come on that. I know that there's been some interest on the board from a little bit more discussion on this. I don't know if there's an interest in having this as a little bit more of a deeper dive carbon discussion at a future meeting, just about kind of things in general, because I know there's been some other questions, I think, as well.
I'd certainly appreciate that deeper dive. I think that's something that is pretty universal here.
I always heard that, so we'll make a note of that for the upcoming, maybe not in the two-picture meeting for that, but that's what I've got for current where we are in the process.
Any questions? Don't see any right away, so jump in if you do. I've got one, and I guess Darren, and just so I'm get my arms around a timeline. So for that deeper, or for you talked about having a data delivery coming up some point in the spring, right?
Yeah, they were shooting for spring of 26.
Okay.
I got that information back from the contractor out doing all those plots.
And so is that data delivery, I guess is my question, is that will we get some guesstimate or modeling of what the potential upfront amount that the forest gets from carbon sales, and then potentially the additionality that comes year after year?
I would imagine that'd be part of that, because that modeling is one of those steps after that data is in, and so that's I would imagine that's part of what they're gonna be figuring out. That is that, what is the actual, because right now it was really an
Actually-
estimate based on
Right.
the previous cruise data that was done
Yeah.
earlier on. And so this will give us a much better picture, accurate picture of as of this fall, what is the,
Yeah.
we'll have much more updated data for them to do that analysis.
I anticipate that. Ken?
I guess I would also ask, Darren, I'm very much interested in the protocol that Anu is going to be using, especially where soil carbon is concerned, and also additionality, you know, how they're going to be calculating additional carbon, that sort of thing. And I don't, I mean, when it's convenient for you to, you know, connect us with that, that would be great.
Yeah, and I think that's something we could probably include in that little bit deeper dive at a future meeting.
And if it's, if the availability is there, Darren, you and I have spoke about this, I've mentioned it to other board members who talked about it, is that I would really appreciate to hear from somebody who's not from a new, who conducts timber or carbon sales, but from the forest that has engaged in a carbon sale, and they get their perspectives, what went right and what went wrong, and how close did they get to predictions in terms of revenue delivered. And Ken's nodding his head. And I think if staff or Ryan, whoever knows who's a comparable project, if there is one, in terms of selling carbon, I'd love to hear from them and give them a half hour of a future meeting or so to present to us. Okay, thanks. Any other questions for Darren on carbon? And item number 3 then, under updates and announcements, is Emma's, and that's an update on research.
Well, remember that you provisionally approved 2 research projects in June. Those agreements were finalized in early September through grant agreements, 2 grant agreements between the Oregon State University College of Forestry and DSL. We have 1 grant agreement for each research project. So we asked researchers to just give us an update on what they've gotten done between September 1st and today, which is actually quite a bit. So the first project we have here is the riparian corridor restoration experiments. I should have the PIs listed, but this is Dr. Dana Warren and Gordy Reeves and a couple of other individuals. And I'll just be reading directly from the slides. So, stream riparian corridors are vital to Oregon's biodiversity and cultural, ecological, and economic values, but have been heavily degraded by past land use. Despite strong theory supporting whole corridor restoration, no replicated experimental studies exist, and this project intends to fill that gap. Their goal is to evaluate how restoration actions enhance structure, hydrologic connectivity, food web complexity to improve stream and riparian species. So in 2025, they scouted field sites, deployed temperature loggers, and completed preliminary fish surveys to inform their site selection. So between 2026 and 2028, they intend to finalize 4 focal sites, collect multi-year pre-treatment ecological data, and initiate restoration treatments in 2028. And I can pause here before going into the next research project, although I'm pretty ill-equipped to answer questions about this specific science.
So good, ask her lots of questions. Yeah.
Yes. Seeing none. Oh, yeah.
Has this been synced up at all with the baseline? There was a lot of conversation about trying to looking at you asking this.
Yeah.
But it'd be good to see whether or not it's.
Yeah, it's my impression that OSU has organized themselves around the research that was approved and then the baseline monitoring funding that we have from state and private forestry, U.S. Forest Service, to make sure that we're not duplicating monitoring efforts or buying duplicate equipment. Is that your understanding, Amy? Does that answer your question? Yeah.
And Caitlin, this is what you were talking about when you were saying that the sales that are going to be laid out here soon are not in those watersheds, right? So as not to complicate the studies from OSU. Is that correct?
Not quite. The sales we laid out are not in the wings of these. They may be in similar watersheds, but we left full watersheds for different research stuff. These may be in partial watersheds, I'm not sure. But we have made sure not to interfere with their wings, they call them. So yeah.
Share with you maps that are in their longer proposal that show what areas of the forest they're in, if you're curious.
Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else on riparian corridor? Marbled murrelet habitat and forest edge study. Again, I should have PI names on here, not my name. This comes from Meg Krawchuk's lab and is also led by Jen Bailey Guerrero. And they recently brought on a graduate student, Cassidy Rudge, who we had the pleasure of meeting with last week and talking a little bit about how he plans to spend his master's degree years. So this study investigates how different forest edge types affect marbled murrelet habitat on the Elliott. Project is co-developed with tribal partners and agency stakeholders, being DSL, to guide the study design. Measurements will include canopy microclimate predator detections, murrelet call activity across various edge types. And since we initiated the grant agreement in September, they've held science team meetings, identified potential partners, and onboarded their graduate student, Cassidy. So within the next year, they're hoping to finalize study design with partners by March and begin data collection from April to September.
Questions? Peter, Jen?
I don't have a question about this, but I have another research related question, so I was going to hold it in case people had questions.
Okay.
Does the messenger happen to know who the tribal partners are?
Good, that's the question.
I'm
That's
just
a good
curious.
question. I would make an assumption that it's the 5 Western Oregon tribes, but I'm not clear. Yeah.
Thanks.
Follow-ups?
So I had a question following up on Fergus's comment, which is, you did a great job of laying out where we are with some of the operations planning. And you also highlighted that for the intensive treatments, you don't want to turn them into something else because then we've lost that comparative opportunity. So I'm sort of curious what conversations are happening around research on the areas that you're laying out. So given you draw our attention to the very important point that we want to be able to do research about what different treatments result in and how they affect things. So that's just a kind of, are there conversations happening? Are we thinking about that research piece in terms of those stands and treatments, leveraging our operations to learn from them?
There's no official research happening yet with the treatments. There's, we have past LiDAR data, we have past stand exam data, inventory, and we're going to have the baseline data going in, and so these treatment types, we're going to be tracking some of the economics. Like I'm going to be tracking how much money it takes for us to put these sales together, how long it takes for them to be laid out. I'm going to be kind of looking at anecdotally how they work, different treatment types, how it's going to work with operators, and kind of get an idea of where we might have more questions. And I think that really the part of this is that we're going to create this landscape that can be comparable. And for instance, when we're talking to the marble murrelet researchers, they were talking about putting in some control plots near where we're about going to do operations so that they can, kill two birds with one stone on that. And so to speak, and could prompt future, that could be a base for a future project. So that's kind of where we're at right now. As you know, we don't have the SCC stood up or SAC or all that. So that's kind of where we're at with that preliminary.
And just to you said we have the baseline monitoring. Are you referring to the OSU monitoring that's going on or just?
Yes.
And that some of that is happening in the stands that we're going to be.
I'm not sure, but maybe in the watersheds. I haven't read the MOU for them, but it's happening across the forest, and so effects could be in the same watershed or.
Just don't want to miss the opportunity.
Yes, neither do I.
Delay some things out.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Mike?
Tagline on that. Do we have any updates or, then perhaps in the future meetings, get updates on where OSU is on their baseline monitoring? How it's going?
We provided our last update, I think, at the September board meeting. And when I reached out to Alex and Chad, they had no further updates since last time they updated us. But I just wanted to make note, I think in future board meetings, we'll have standing update items for forest operations, which will include harvest, carbon, if there are any updates. And then we can have a research/monitoring update item too. And that should parallel the email updates that you'll receive monthly. So you will be up to date.
Yeah, that's timely. I think I was going to ask the same question and request that at a future meeting and not in the spring, because I'd like to give the knowing conditions in the forest. It's sometimes hard to get through the winter, but at least late summer next year to invite the researchers again and to come and present to us on what they've done and what they're beginning to gather. I think that would be very appropriate, and perhaps OSU would at the same meeting with an update on baseline.
I was going to suggest. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Aaron? Yeah, sorry. Yeah, he's trying to get on.
I was just gonna jump in about the baseline monitoring with part of Brian's onboarding. He and I actually are gonna be meeting with going to OSU and having a conversation a little bit, kind of help get Ryan up to speed, and so we'll have a little bit of a deeper dive about really where they're at with the baseline. So we probably have some information to share fairly soon again after that. We're trying to do that here, squeeze that in around the holiday here. So we'll have some stuff to update the board with. Thanks.
It's something that might be helpful for some of the updates is to also have some maps that allow us to understand the interaction overlays, intersections between monitoring, between stands that we're doing operations on, between the riparian, so like we can even sort of see here's where this is happening. Because I think visually seeing that is at least helpful for my brain to then understand where they do or don't or could interact in ways that, it's harder to get when it's just text. Thanks.
Maps be good.
Look like capacity wise, I think developing those maps might be a considerable time, but we can at least provide separate maps.
Yeah, I would even that I think would be helpful just to
Yeah.
be able to visually see things, and we can make some of those comparisons ourselves.
okay.
And at some point it may also be useful for folks to have the overlaid opportunity, to be able to quickly answer a question for yourselves. Like, how does this relate to that? Right. But point taken that I know it takes some capacity to do that. So.
I don't have access to their GIS system, so I can't. Any other questions on research?
Okay. So we are nothing else. We're all good with staff updates on operations, carbon, and research. No further questions. Okay. Item 3 then is board business relating to the roles of chair and vice chair for the Elliott State Research Forest Board of Directors. And as a quick update, as you know, we had a a discussion about whether those positions should, what the term, the duration of those positions should be. Was the board's consensus that they should be a year with the potential to appoint or elect people to those positions for longer than that. The
For additional terms.
for additional terms, right? And we, in trying to be careful about serial communications, I think we initiated and then quickly backed out of a discussion about those roles and who might be interested or who might not be interested in terms of filling those going into the next calendar year. So, and hold those until this meeting. And with that, and I'm going to some interest in upcoming year. Those are the only two members of the board who spoke or contacted me about potentially filling those positions. And so I'll give the board a chance to chime in, but I wanted to find out before we move on, is there anybody else interested in either of those positions at the board or as chair or vice chair, or if I can't imagine there'll be much opposition to the two outstanding individuals who are submitted their names and are interested in the position. Okay, I just see everybody kind of nodding. So before I'm going to seek a nomination then for those two individuals momentarily, but I thought I'd before we went on, I'd see if there was any other communication or any other conversation board members wanted to have about the process or about the roles of those positions. Haley?
What I just heard the proposal was that each of those positions would be a 1-year term. Is there unlimited renewals, or did people express wanting, like, what is the renewal?
I believe that in our previous discussion that there was no mention of a limited number of renewals. If that's what you're asking, could you and Jennifer, for example, be voted in for the next 3 or 4 years? Potentially, I think the board has not said that is impossible or should be not allowed.
Yeah, I was just curious what the, because I don't feel like we've even voted on what, like the process and the rules at all. So I was just curious if that was part of what you guys were bringing forward today, was a vote on a proposal for term length and reoccurrence, or if we're trying to have that conversation now and.
Right, I'm trying to have it now. That's
Okay.
what
Okay.
I want. And unless I'm wrong, there was no discussion that proposed a term length other than each individual term would be 1 year, but there was no proposed limit on how many terms consecutively people might serve.
We had a discussion about it, but we didn't ever reach a conclusion.
Board interest there and board concerns? Mike?
A lot of the discussion, I think we didn't maybe come to total consensus, but if I remember correctly, there was a lot of talk of maybe 2 terms in a row,
Okay.
but not necessarily that's it.
Okay.
But preference for that, perhaps, so that give a little variety, leadership and all.
Okay.
But that being said, if it's folks that really work well, need to kick them out
Yeah.
from the roles.
So is that a proposal then, Mike, that you want us to
I'd like to hear
Dis-
what others are
okay.
thinking about it too.
I'll just go around and give everybody a shot. Haley, if Mike's discussion item about a 2-year limit, so that would be one extension of term if we have 1-year terms.
Yeah, I think there's some value in having transition in the positions. I also think it can be really common in boards to when you don't have that, that you're losing your stack of people who are matriculating into leadership roles. And then sometimes if you have an unexpected transition, you actually don't have kind of that expectation and skill set of other people elevating into that role. So I think that I would be definitely supportive of something like that. You know, maybe it's a 2-year term for the vice chair and chair role. The vice chair could move into, you know, a chair role and start terms in that. But I definitely think there's value in kind of supporting some of that transition.
So you'd be supportive of a 2-year limit in terms of how long you might serve in those roles.
Yeah, I think what I heard Mike say is potentially 1-year terms, but you could serve two in a
That's
row
exactly.
in either position, and then you could move from one to another. Yeah, I would be supportive of that, but I'm also interested in hearing other groups' perspectives.
Okay.
Yeah, I really like the idea of limiting how long people can serve. I think I could see a situation in which this board gets a little stagnant, maybe just having one person in leadership over the years. And I want to make sure that any new board members that are coming on feel that they have the opportunity to advance into that kind of role rather than just sticking with the status quo if we've had, you know, the same person in that seat for like 5 years, for example. So I'd be in favor of the 2 1-year terms.
Okay, 2 1-year terms. Jennifer.
With the views that have just been expressed, I also think it allows for people to potentially stay on a board after they've served and be a mentor, right? So you continue to have some of that institutional memory and leadership, but it also allows people to step into those roles while still having people who can say, here's how we did it. So yeah, I like it.
Peter?
I'm happy to live with what everything has been suggested. My druthers was a little different in that I think it takes a while for a leader to become settled in and effective. And and I understand that given people's lives and how long they can commit for, that's a whole nother thing we got to figure in here. But I feel, in my experience, often if you get the 1-year mark, a leader, a chair of a board and vice chair are just sort of hitting their stride, like they're just sort of figuring it out. So my proposal originally was 2 years for that reason, but I understand the pragmatic point that came up, which would make it 1. And so I think I agree that having a healthy rotation is important. I would think having the limit like 4 years. So essentially it would be the equivalent of people doing sort of 2-year terms, even though they're 1-year terms. I think having a chance to have some stability and direction with the board is good. And the other thought I have is, I think we ought to be thoughtful about leadership in all forms. So the chair and the co-chair or vice chair are just 2 leadership opportunities, but we'll probably have subcommittees over the years, whatever. I think having a culture that cultivates a deep bench of capable leaders, and also I'm a big fan of encouraging the rising generation in this whole business. So doing everything we can to have a supportive atmosphere that will help people not only be willing to step up, but help them succeed. So I think an additional thing is to think about, I think the past chair, vice chair role is an important one, particularly around the nominations and things where there's need to do some arm twisting or whatever. So I think basically figure out what are all our tools in the toolbox around leadership and how do we successfully use them.
Thank you.
That's
Ken?
what I think.
And
Does this be the first time we get to hear from Ken on this
yeah,
issue?
yeah. And Peter read my mind, but put it in much more eloquent terms, I think, than I would have. But I that was the comment I was going to make as well, is that 2 years is kind of a good length of time for somebody to grow into a role. And so I think, and at the same time, an effective leader sometimes is, you don't want to kick out somebody who's doing a good job just because you have, term limits. But I also agree that a certain amount of, turnover is good for the organization because everybody gets to move into leadership role at some point or another. And so my thought would be, 2-year terms as a limit for the length of time to serve. Because I've served on boards that have had various, lengths of time, and in some cases, vice president becomes the president and stuff. And I don't necessarily agree with that. I know there was some discussion of that on email as well. So I'm kind of a fan of two-year terms.
Okay, listen.
I'm just generally not in favor of term limits because I think it's prescriptive and not for any real purpose other than people just not wanting to deal with conflict. If we put those in place, then yeah, there will be times that you'll be grateful that you have a term limit. There will be other times that you'll be sorry that you have a term limit. I think as board members, it's our responsibility to be willing to step up and say, I think we need a change in leadership if that's where the roles need to go. And I thought Peter and Ken both put it really well. I do think perhaps those roles should be 2 years, especially as the Elliott is forming and moving forward. Changing leadership really often might be challenging.
Mike?
I'll
turn the mic.
Yeah,
Sir.
I'll kick in here too. I would not be opposed at all to two-year terms. Like I think others have said, it takes a while to get up to speed in your duties. Once you're there, you might want to stay there for a little bit. Use what you've learned getting to that point. So I wouldn't have a problem with that.
Okay. Mike?
Yeah, a lot of good points already about as far as, learning the job and just getting into it, and seeing that practiced. Involving some of the boards, and they don't have, for the most part, they do not have limits. And I really experienced a lot of problems with that. The only other one that I have experiences were it wasn't that impressive a comment. I have to have it recorded.
Yeah. People went, wow, Mike's on, and they just. Everybody tuned in. Okay, we'll come back. Hannah, we good? Okay, we, after our hiccup, we're back on the air. Mike, the microphone was yours.
Break it. Yeah, what experience I had with some of them turned out, it wasn't. Majority of people didn't want to see that happen. We just had those in bylaws that they had to time out. That was unfortunate. So it's one experience I had. If we're going to have one, 3 years, yeah, it's a little long. I'd be fine with 2 years, but for the most part, not having one would be my preference, but I can live with either.
Okay.
Just wanted to note the action item today is for roles and the appointment process. So I just wanted to prompt a conversation about what our expectations are for the chair and vice chair. And I think in prior conversations we've had noted the capacity that's required to just be a board member on this board and the additional capacity that's required for chair and vice chair. And I would love, from staff perspective, to hear what the board expects of their leaders and how they interact with the Elliott staff. So just wanted to.
Okay, well, so let me go back to Peter, and then before we move on, because we're going to have to find a happen spot, you know, that's right, you know, before we do that, then we'll come back to the staff's question.
Good. So I just wanted to clarify what I was saying, which is I was hearing that a potential limiting factor of 2 years is there might be people, there might 1 year, but I'm not really willing to commit for 2 years. And I think that's a legitimate things, and particularly for supporting the younger generations as well. So might come and go. So what I was proposing was not 2-year terms. I was proposing 1-year terms. And if we have the possibility to renew it, if we've got someone who is a good fit for the 2-year term or 2-year terms, great. But I would see taking it in 1-year clumps, which gives us a greater opportunity into the capacity to welcome the kind of leadership we want. So if we get to the point of wanting a motion, I'm happy.
Got it.
But
Okay.
just to be clear, I was saying 1 year, not 2 years.
All right, Haley, I'm sorry.
Just one other piece on that is, you could have a situation where a board member only has 1 year on their term of service on the Elliott board. And we would, having 2-year terms, we would be removing the opportunity potentially for those people to serve in a leadership role in their last year on the Elliott and, you know, not knowing if they will get renewed or not.
Okay.
We went through the process to put together the appointment process for the standard seats. And so I encourage the board to document whatever you decide here today so we can make sure that those two processes are compatible, like with the ending term limits and things like that. Documentation, please.
Okay, so I guess Emma was seeking, or staff, I think, was seeking a bit from the board on what their expectations of the two leadership, and specifically chair and vice chair, but also that would percolate down to committee chairs or subcommittee chairs as well. So because staff has asked that question, Jen, since you got the microphone, I'll give it to you to begin with.
So I was thinking back to our discussions also about making sure people have time to think about things. And so one thought I had on the one about roles is, because I think it is still, there are ideas bubbling around, but we haven't really had a chance to think about it, is that would it make sense for to come back to this board with a more clear statement about roles and kind of expectations around these, as opposed to having to figure that out today? I know, you know, we've had some conversations about it, but I'm just sort of feeling like I'm not sure what action, I'm trying to understand what action would be most helpful today. And is there any merit to making sure there's a little more space to talk about laying that out? And maybe not.
I think, if I can, Jenna's request was not for a particular action, just some input.
Yeah, my request is to hear you all contemplate today what your expectations of those roles are. And then I'm curious if Darren wants to jump in here of how the board interacts with staff and what staff's role is in supporting your development of this appointment and role process. How we can and can't support you, what should be in your place and what is ours.
Yeah. All right, so I'm going to start at this end, Mike. Don't break the internet again. So if you have anything in terms of input to staff's request on a brief discussion by board members on what they expect out of leadership. And if I can, I apologize. And I think, and Emma, tell me if I'm wrong. I think part of that question might revolve around requests of staff for information and how that might or might not best be done. Does that make sense? I mean, does it? So I'll just leave it at that, and that way I'm not putting not directing anything here. So go ahead, Mike, just as brief or as long as you wish.
Yeah, I guess I'm still trying to process. So you're asking about how the board or the board chairs, vice chair interacts and makes requests, and then that flow of information from those positions out to the board members.
I think that's a great example. And then one that came up in our conversation yesterday about how you all work together was the process for developing agenda items. And what Keith and Melissa and I have been doing is meeting, I think about a month ahead, or probably what our process has been is that following a board meeting, we recap that board meeting and then draft an agenda for the following board meeting. And I've communicated to Keith and Melissa that I would love for them to spend time with each of you in the in-between meetings to understand what you all would like to see on the agenda. So as staff, individual staff aren't interacting with individual board members and then coalescing ideas. So that's another example of, I just want to be clear of how are we developing agenda items? How are we responding to requests to information is another
Yeah,
great example.
Thank you. That helps a lot. It's a really good example. It's, I agree with that balance. Like the discussion we've had, if there's interest from the board on learning more about the carbon project and understanding the details of that and seeing some examples and getting that on the agenda, and also time. That's a back and forth. Board members talking to the vice chair and talking with you about what should be on the agenda, but also allowing enough time, whether it's just like a discussion item versus an approval. So there's that coming from the board, but then there seems like there's also staff and Darren up the chain as far as what you need from the board as far as going forward. Maybe we really want to talk about this, and you're saying, okay, but I really need to have these things approved or discussed. Positions instead of vital for that role, that very forward for interest items, but also focusing on things.
That's exactly right. And maybe one distinction we could think about is like what distinguishes these two positions from the other seats? What sets them apart? What responsibilities do they have that you all don't carry?
Well, quick on that, yeah, I would see that exactly that role. Hopefully we could, I hopefully it's open enough where we could talk to you, other staff, Caitlin, good questions, but as far as you getting bombarded by board members, that flow of information or flow of requests is maybe more funneled down through the positions.
I was going to kind of make that same comment because in a lot of, situations that I've been in, there's a board and then there's something like an executive director role that then, the board directs the director, gives direction to the director, and then the director handles the staff, passes that along to the staff and makes sure the staff is doing what the board wants the staff to do. And I know sometimes boards can get into trouble with, individual board members sort of trying to manage staff individually. And if there's a clear conduit, with an executive director like position here, that could keep those kinds of things from happening so that you would have clear lines of direction, that, the board would give direction to staff via this pathway. I think it's probably important.
Darren, did you want to jump in here?
Sure, I can jump in a little bit. So I think that what we've been doing, like what Emma alluded to before about we do the recaps with, the vice
Yep.
chair and the chair right after, the week or so after we have these meetings, to have that communication and then kind of leave that, I think for, Emma said, to leave that for you two to then reach out to the rest of the board about what are the topics that are on everyone's mind that we should have on the upcoming agendas. I think that helps with, yeah, focusing how much things come directly to staff members. And let me preface that with the fact that I don't have any issue, this is not intended to want to stifle any communications, anytime everybody has my number, email and staff, everybody else is like, if you have a question about something, reach out to individual staff. It's not meant to do that. But as far as kind of tracking the big things that we want to make sure that we're talking about at board meetings, the big things that we need that are on our list that we want to have that are spelled out on in our process that need to have that advice and recommendations from the board to make sure that we are tracking those, that we're kind of getting those kind of queued up on upcoming meetings about what's the right timing, when are those right for discussion. I think it works well with the way we kind of got that, but doing that right after the meeting, to build that next agenda. But leaving that, ultimately it's your board. Some of that discussion, some of that about you guys decide about what are the things that are important to you that you want to see us bring up for discussion and cover at board meetings. That's probably on you guys too. But then one was like, yeah, man, I think that's kind of, I see that as M&I, our role. We're the ones that normally meet with you to have those discussions about what's, planning for the next meetings. I think that works well. So I think, unless anybody else has any issues with that, but like I said, that not to stifle any other time on other issues that individual members have questions in between meetings about things, certainly not. It's not that, everything must cycle through.
Yeah.
That is like, no, we're not trying to do that. But I think for the big things, it's good to have this process to kind of funnel things through.
And my suspicion is that in all the boards and bodies that we've all served on and served in leadership positions, that's a pretty standard mode of operation that staff and board members and leadership, help set an agenda, review and set an agenda. And I think that works really well. I mean, whether no matter who the leadership is, I think that makes sense. So I'd like to, I don't think anybody's really questioning that in terms of the agenda setting and recap of previous meetings. I think we'd all like to go through. Haley?
Yeah, I think this is a little further complicated by the different layers of roles and responsibilities here, because it's not as simple as the executive director board relationship, which is more traditional, and there are a little bit more clear pathways and delineations for responsibilities in that model, I think. But here we're dealing with land board, DSL leadership that oversees you, and then you overseeing your team, and then we're in here as this advisory body. So I think that it's a little bit more complicated. I don't think it's like you can't work through that, but I wonder if it's worth, I don't think this is going to be solved in the 5 minutes that we have on the agenda for this item left, but I think that maybe we can look at the very confusing but helpful diagram that Hannah put together of like all of the different roles of committees and board and DSL and land board and all of that, and maybe sit with that and think about, okay, what is the board's role? Therefore, how does the board need to interact and support in these various circumstances? Because I think that I hear you say it's your board, but I don't think we're running independently now. I think we're running with a high level of staff support. And if the intention is that this is our board, then we do need to be operating a little bit differently from my perspective. So I think maybe this is something that could be, maybe a subcommittee or a group of people could kind of work on delineating this and then work with staff and, DSL to maybe kind of make a proposal for what those roles and responsibilities might look like. And I think that could ultimately lead to like a better delineation of like what the chair and vice chair is doing and how that's different from just like the board membership. But I personally, I think we need a little bit more time to kind of like sit with the roles.
Well, I'm gonna finish going around, guys. So that was my intent. I rolled this way once and now I'm trying to get back. And Mike,
Let's say you came up with Stingo, chair and vice chair duties and stuff.
Yeah.
And I wonder, sorry. So, a few months back, I think, Melissa sent out, came up with a listing of chair, vice chair, proposed duties. And I'm wondering if we might have that sent out again and use that just as a basis to start discussions, do some edits to that, because there was a lot of good information in there about roles of the chair and vice chair, particularly as it related to the rest of the board and coming up with agenda items, things like that. So maybe that's the start of a document that we start with.
Thanks, Mike. Melissa?
No, I'm just a listening member.
Okay. Ken, you've had your, it's good. Pete?
Mike said what I was going to say, which is, if we don't have a job description, I think we ought to have a job description. I think we ought to put a date on it. And I think it'd be important to have staff have an active role in providing advice and input. What of that is, and I think the fact that once they've already made a start on it, would get us a spot where within a reasonable finite known amount of time, we have something written down in operation.
Then?
Nothing to add. I said a similar thing earlier, so I agree.
Peyton?
Yeah, like Mike's idea of recirculating that document so we can all look at the job description again. And also just taking some more time. I'd really like to hear what staff has to say about roles or what expectations are of those roles. And we're also very early in the process of, kind of propping up this forest. And I'm sure that those roles are going to look a little different now than they are 7 years from now. So being able to really think that through and just get everyone's perspective and the job description.
Thanks. Haley? Okay, okay.
Say something else.
Okay, go ahead.
So we put together a workday listing for the open seat, Ken seat. So I can direct you to that online. It's always available because it's always an open application. And in that application, we specified, I think it's 40 hours a month is the expectation for time for a general seat, which is a lot. And that came from director level who spent that much time in her seat. So just considering that when you're drafting the roles.
Okay. And going back to Emma's question about how we see our roles in engaging with staff. And I think I want to be, I hope we don't overcomplicate this. And what I would see in a situation that works best, I've been on boards where you're asked to simply that leadership requests from an executive director and then for information, and then they filter that down to staff members. And I've certainly been on boards when one member tends to bogart staff time with a ridiculous request number of detailed information. And I'd certainly don't like either of those. I think there's times when board members with a quick questioning, can you send me that information again? I really appreciate it. I think we have to, my preference is that we would allow that and that staff members are very, the board members are very careful with the amount of time that they make contact and the request for information from staff members. But I don't think I'd like to think we're small enough that direct communication is available, and it probably makes sense if I'm going to contact a staff member, if I'm going to reach out to Caitlin for some information, that I loop Darren into that contact as well, and then he can sort of be in my vision, and he can sort of be the guardian of staff time if he needs to tell me to shut up and sit down. That's the way I see our flow of information. On the other hand, I think what we've been doing is the standard where staff and the chair and vice chair debrief after a meeting how to go. Would we not do well? We then participate in the agenda setting and probably in the meantime, kind of get take the temperature of the room and see what information and agenda items the board members are interested in coming up with in upcoming meetings. So, and I think we've been trying to do that, and maybe I didn't reach out well enough in that regard.
What you just said, the thing I meant to say and forgot is, it seems like having a position description is only as good as our ability to assess how well we're doing with that. So my suggestion there would be to have some really simple but effective system, basically to check in and hold ourselves accountable for how well is it working. Any system can only be improved. So there's some system that allows for the feedback, which could be like, things are just going fine, or no, we got a problem here, we need to adjust it. So some kind of a feedback loop that allows for course correct as we go.
In a simple world, our job description would be a good board member, right? And I think that 98% of the time, that's about what you get, good board members. But so some set of leadership descriptions and board descriptions that probably make sense, and they exist. We can formalize that, and we're not going to do it today. So let me back up again and go back to the question at hand about the leadership roles. And so it seemed like that there was a little bit of difference among board members about, I didn't think any difference in board members among 2 terms. I think everybody said, at least 2 terms, and Melissa said, and I tend to agree that I'm not a big fan of term limits in that regard, but I can live with 2. So let me have less discussion there and see if we can find a consensus on whether those are 1 or 2 year terms, because there's been there was some variation in board members' intent, or board members' preference, excuse me.
Are you looking for decisions today?
Yeah, I think I am, and at least on we're here. Serial communication concerns makes it hard for us to have this discussion out there in the netherworld, and so I'd like us to. My suggestion is that we sort of hack this out today and come to a consensus on what that looks like. Because otherwise we do it at the next board meeting, because we really can't do it very well through an email. Right? We can, but it's more complicating than it ought to be. I don't think we need a motion right now. I'm just trying to get for me, and if you wish to make one, but I'm just trying right now to find a consensus, and then if we have a consensus, then we can seek a motion. But that's what I'd like to just come to some sort of agreement.
What I heard was 1 year terms that are renewed without term limits. That's what I sort of heard.
Okay, so
but I put that out there for people to respond to and say, no, that's not what.
Okay. So I mean, I guess let's start with Jen's point, and we'll go thumbs up, thumbs down, some sideways. And I mean, is that a 1 year with no limit?
But they can be. Well,
Theoretically.
I mean, so that's the limit thing.
About thumbs up, sideways, thumbs down on that. Thumbs up, sideways. Okay, we got 2 sideways and so there we go. Well, that's a decent consensus. Nobody is going to flag. So okay, and I'm good thinking. So on if the board hadn't planned to, but if the board wants to entertain a motion as to setting term limits of leadership to 1 year terms with no limit on the number of terms consecutive, we can consider a motion.
I think if we don't have a contested race for chair and vice chair, the motion can just be to appoint Jennifer and Haley as chair and vice chair for 1 year. And that would give the board additional time to approve those roles and responsibilities in January if they want
Okay,
to think about it.
is it, we good with
And
that?
to me, that's a decision that has to be made today, is who's getting appointed and for how long.
Okay. So, were there other board members who were interested or motions that you might like to make? Did you have something to add, Mike? Oh, okay, good.
Was no other discussion. I was gonna make a motion.
Please make the motion.
I will make a motion. Jennifer as chair and Haley as vice chair for your
Beginning January 1.
January 1.
Okay. And, okay, yeah, so, and then that gives us, with the understanding that gives board time then to codify.
Yeah, to bring those back in January.
Okay. All right, so we have a motion and a second to appoint Jennifer as chair of the Elliott State Research Board of Directors, Forest Board of Directors, Alexis co-chair, or vice chair, excuse me. Any further questions on that? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? There you go. Congratulations. Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
I did a steady hand on the helm through a really
Yeah.
crucial period. And
We're gonna have a coup before January 1st. Just to make it exciting around here.
Yeah, just try it.
Yeah. Okay, so let's end that. We've got, that gives us a discussion item and potential action item on January 1st about term limits and codifying that. And with that, what do we got again? I'm looking at I gotta find my agenda. Okay, so we have a review of I got it. You're right. Biannual operations plan after action review.
Our last meeting, we asked you a few questions about how the planning and public engagement process and your interaction with the biennial operations plan development process went. We also talked to DSL and Elliott staff, as well as Farm Unlimited that was involved in the development of the plan. And then we also reached out to specific members of the public who submitted comments on the plan with the same prompts. Whew, I like really ran up the stairs. So in your board packets, you have everyone's responses compiled, as well as the full planning process summary to reflect on. So I can walk you through it briefly here. Between January and June, we solicited board member feedback on the draft plan. In February and April, we opened our public comment period with 2 virtual public meetings. And then in June, we asked for your recommendation for Darren to adopt the biennial operations plan. I think, oh, no, okay. So we identified a few challenges. The timing of the unfinished HCP and FMP and how that interacted with the BOP process created a little uncertainty for those who were identifying the projects for the plan. There was a little bit of lack of clarity on how research interacted with the BOP and whether research should be included in the BOP. You all expressed a limited transparency engagement time to engage with the BOP. And then there were also concerns over staff capacity to implement the projects that were outlined to the BOP. Looking ahead, our BOP process will begin pretty soon here to plan for the next biennium. So we can look ahead to really positive collaboration between Elliott staff and Farm Unlimited. We have an effective GIS-based harvest selection and ground truthing process that was developed during the 25-27 planning process that we can replicate next time. Large format maps we can use for more spatial assessment and decision making. And then also we're fully staffed. So this will enable more thorough planning around recreation, education, and research. And that's all I have. If anyone had any questions about the after action review report, now's the time to ask me. Yeah, Mike?
Question and had to do with the process.
Yeah.
We're in the report, I talked about hold public comment period, public meeting in February 2025, little bullet there. It mentioned that an email, Emma and Ryan sent out emails to natural resource staff at Alcrete, Doyle, and CT Lucy. I was wondering why Celeste ran wrong with.
I think that is a mistake in the report. I'll double check where our emails were sent, but I am sure that we sent them to all 5. Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks for
Not
catching up.
sure that all 5.
You're on it in your board packet today, Mike. Good work. Honestly, I don't know if we want to set that precedent for who has the most edits on their board. It's a surprise. Any other reflections or questions? Okay, cool. I think we're on to retreat recap.
Yep. It has been a terrific retreat, I think, in terms of provided a chance for board building, which was really, really needed and valuable. And I'm going to let board members and staff have their just role. Particularly the time that we were allotted. Kudos to the DSL for finding the resources to allow us to this for so long, and to staff for planning and pulling it off, and for a trivia contest that was great fun, and Birds Aren't Real win again. So, and I'm going to start with you. I mean, you were largely responsible for plotting and planning, and so tell us what went well and what didn't.
I think overall the opportunity for board and staff to get to know each other in a slightly more casual, albeit still public setting, was very successful. And I also think that the opportunities for small groups to work together and discuss some items that have been on the docket for discussion for a while was also very successful.
Yeah.
I'll be very grateful to Hannah for taking very diligent notes the entire time and without bathroom breaks. So thank you, Hannah. Yeah, and for making it fun. I said this last night, but Hannah just brings fun into everything she does. And I want to thank Peter and Jennifer for chiming in and helping develop the agenda and providing feedback. And then the rest of you also for filling out the Microsoft form and ranking the different agenda items. And I think that is all that I have to say on that. But you should feel free to reach out to Hannah or I with thoughts about the retreat, what worked well, what didn't. We will probably only be able to have one retreat per biennium for financial and capacity reasons. So it makes sense to really take them seriously and plan them thoughtfully.
Haley?
Yeah, I thought it was just a really good time spent together. It was really nice to get to know everybody on board and staff, just because it is, it's been a long process, but it's also the beginning of kind of a new phase in it. And so to kind of get to know and talk about how we all collaborate best moving forward, I think was really valuable, and just a lot of good substantive conversations and things learned that I think are going to help us make good informed decisions in the future.
Hayden.
Retreat was a big success. And thank you, and Hannah, very much for putting it all together. But, you know, when we kicked this off, we all went around and spoke to what we wanted to get out of it. And I think a pretty common theme was just getting to know our fellow board members and Elliott and DSL staff better. And I think that that was achieved.
Caitlin.
I'm just grateful to be here. It's been an eye-opening experience and I've learned a lot. I've never been involved in this process with a board before, so I've just been soaking it all up, and thank you for putting this on, Hannah and Emma, and thank you for being here.
Most
Yeah, I'll echo what people have already said. I think it was really successful, and I think you really did a nice job of allowing us to learn from each other about, about perspectives on some of the really important issues that we will continue to navigate. So I think you really structured it in a way that we could both get to know each other and also kind of, like learn a lot from the perspectives that were shared on that front. And I think the balance, like between the full group and the small groups, was also really nice in terms of that same learning from each other. So thank you. And I just also want to pass along our thanks to Danielle, because I think having someone facilitate it who was just that one step away from the heart of it really was helpful. And not having someone here have to sort of take on that role as well. So please thank her.
And Emma would like to let you know that if you're ever in Majorca and you need a scuba lesson.
So basically what they said, and I'll add, well planned, well executed, fun, stimulating, very successful, increased clarity and cohesion. Welcoming in a new director, I think, was a significant part of our mix here. I really liked the demonstration of shared leadership and kind of the buried treasure of getting to know people, like seeing you at work. You did a really terrific job there, and getting a better sense of Hannah's dry sense of humor.
Before we're done.
She's gonna do the magic, right?
Yeah.
And I want to end by just saying that Emma and Hannah, you put a ton of work in this, and you are the park if we're using it. I hope you go home feeling really good about it. We gave you a really difficult task and territory you hadn't personally navigated myself with, so you stepped up really well.
Ken?
Yeah, and for me, how lucky I was to join the board right before this retreat. Because, learning the players, who's staff, who's board, who's doing what and stuff would have been much more difficult, I think, for me had I not been all together in one place with you. And so I really appreciate it. And I appreciate all the work that the board did, giving direction to Hannah and Emma to put this all together. I think it was a great success. It was really fun getting to know everybody. And I think I feel really good about this board. I feel really good about this board and the opportunities we have going forward. So thanks a lot.
Good. Staff, now.
Staff. Well, everybody said most of the things that I could think of, but having worked together closely with our staff, but not so closely with the board. So this was a great opportunity to spend a little more in-depth time than seems like the board meetings the agenda is moving pretty fast, and we often don't get time to have side conversations or just appreciate someone's perspective. And so the social time and the not real structured time, but some of the spin-off conversations were great. And the cohesion between the board and the staff feels really good. Not that it didn't feel good before, but I'm really looking forward to working together in the future. And I have a better sense of being comfortable with oh, a good person to ask this would be let's ask Peter, let's ask Mike, because we've had that time developed. So hats off to our great organizers and for everybody making time for this. I think it was a very good success. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm going to echo what Ken said from a staff perspective. I feel really fortunate to have come on last month. Had enough time to get my feet under me a little bit at the office, and then to come here and meet all of our board members and have a lot of unstructured conversations and get to know all of you so that I can bring your incredibly valuable and diverse perspectives in as I start to build out the research program for the forest.
So I'll say, yeah, I was gonna say ditto to everything else, but I will say as the manager, I just want to thank everybody for their attendance and participation, and especially for the board, because you're doing this on your own time to participate. It's this time out of your busy schedules with your other regular jobs and other things to do. So I appreciate the full and active participation of board and my staff, and especially thanks to my staff and particularly Anna and Emma for all the behind the scenes work that went into getting all the logistics and everything pulled together for this meeting. I really appreciate that. So, and yeah, it was great to have as Amy mentioned about our regular board meetings are pretty structured. Not a lot of time. We have pretty set things we're trying to get through. It doesn't leave a lot of time for those other conversations that are great to have. We got some good ones of those around with getting here some different perspectives of things that we wouldn't necessarily get in that setting. And so this was really helpful, and I think it helped with our relationship building and with setting us up to work together going forward.
I typically find retreats to be a complete crapshoot. And yeah, we've had two. This is actually the second we've had in the Elliott process. We had one years ago at the Big K Ranch and early in the process, and they have both been exceptional. Enough said. That way above my expectations in terms of staff and board building and teamwork and review of material and potential subjects. So it went great.
Thank you. I don't know if you all have left just so much to say, except thank you. I know the amount of work that goes into putting one of these retreats together. It's really appreciate it.
Thank you. Awesome. What everybody else has said. I found it very, very useful. Very useful team building. Of course. That being said, future ones too. And maybe future ones would be on certain topics that we're interested in one time in. Ideally, field going into it. So,
Yeah, that'd be great.
That's putting what we're done. We will.
Field component.
I think we've talked about have the right to put in the process and information. And I think we did a great job of presentations, writing presenters, some hands-on, speaking notes, writing things down. So yeah, that was great. How we run away the process and relaying information. Thank you. I still think they're challenge a few of the trivia questions. I don't know if we still have opportunity for that. Maybe at some point we can talk about a dispute resolution.
I want to first say that I have no intention of relinquishing my trivia prize, no matter what happens with the after review of the final scores. So we're clear on that. We asked a lot of people. We ask a lot of you all, and we have an obligation as an agency. Really good space to work, come together, and think and create and advise and lead. Going to let us with care and great thought. Do I need to talk louder? I always need to talk louder and I never want to. it's gonna help this team cultivate and care for you and your ability to contribute to working. So thank you all. Thank you all. It's been amazing.
Please.
In the Elliott, we talk about traditional ecological knowledge, and often that will be, how do you do burning or whatever, but I think the whole category of traditional ecological knowledge, that's about how do people come together, work together, resolve differences, be together. And I think a hope I would have as this whole project goes forward is that we set a goal of including traditional ecological knowledge about how people do what we've just been doing, in a way that's welcoming and inclusive and doesn't put any one mic person on the spot. But I think that there's potential for us to learn and gain, and it would make our processes better. And also I think it could be helpful in the work of welcoming the 5 tribes in an authentic way. So maybe the next retreat might have that, and maybe it was a piece of this, but I think it's a thing that we could tap into. There's potential there.
Thank you. Okay, the last is a review of action items and assignments. And I miss anything? What's that? If you feel free.
Any? Okay, so I can't remember who asked, but sharing an overall layout map of units in the BOP, and that was assigned to Forrester Caitlin. Development of a presentation on carbon at a future board meeting. That's assigned to Darren and the Elliott team, and I think we've got some conversations starting on that, and so we can work with the board chair and vice chair to develop that further. Peter asked a question about how the Elliott will meet the Oregon Forest Practices Act and brought in the point that ODF managed lands are managed above PFA regulations. And so an explanation of how we plan to interact with their policy would be helpful. Jennifer asked for a map that shows how research sites interact with other projects on the forest, or at the very least separate maps that detail those activities. Darren and Ryan, after meeting with Chad and Alex, can provide update on baseline monitoring. I can share out the workday posting for board members again. There was one other that I wanted to say. I ran to the restroom. How did we resolve the action item for roles and the appointment process for chair and vice chair, and who's assigned
The
that?
resolution was that we elected Jennifer and Haley as chair and vice chair for the upcoming calendar year, and that in January we'll review review board roles and responsibilities.
Okay, you all accomplished a lot. Okay. Did I miss anything?
Reissuing roles and responsibility. Let's say.
Yeah.
Okay.
A few years ago, a few months ago, anyway.
Feels like yours. Did I miss any items?
Some other folks? Agenda topic items for future meetings. You touched on that. Certainly a carbon review or of a particular carbon project, not simply. And that, and then anything else the board? Meetings and agenda items.
Yes, now that I guess we're staffed up and looking at timber sales, and we can start to look at the financial, the fiscal responsibilities, and what that dollar figure be certain points down the road, and just as the carbon discussion comes on, how when we will meet those responsibilities.
And we'll have, well, you guys know better than I would, with that, if we get timber. With
We lost you, Keith.
Is that you, Chris?
Well, yeah, sorry, you cut out. I can hear you now. I
Yes.
think. Okay. Oh, you cut out online. That's all I was saying. If you could repeat your last sentence or two.
I think I just was pointing out that come the first half of the year, the end of the second quarter, we'll probably have more specific information about potential revenue from sales in those first groups that Caitlin talked about. That was just simply to add to Mike's point about financial information and in future.
Yeah, I'll comment. I really like this idea of the map overlaying all these initiatives. I also acknowledge the capacity piece. Being here's waste service. Okay. I'm not sure, but it seems like there might be some strong possibilities there. There's also restoration actively being planned on the forest. We received funding to taking off my board hat, and not executive director to Watershed Association hat. We are planning a large woody debris installation project with Amy and team within this BOP period. And so I think that would also be cool to overlay on the map, because that area has been defined in really close coordination and collaboration with all the researchers and proposals to make sure we're all functioning well, but that'd be efficient.
Excellent.
I made a note on the GIS side that could be even an interesting project for a GIS class at some college or university to take on. Be a cool thing for them to get a chance to.
Do you have a particular college in mind? Hint? Oh, okay.
Community college
Yeah.
is any of multiple universities.
Okay. Anybody else on quick wish list for agenda items in upcoming meetings?
Staff needing to get us up to date on your decisions too. I think Karen, you had put out something before of a run schedule for when things would come out in January.
Yeah, that's something that Emma and I worked on. Yeah, we had kind of an initial kind of timeline for but Emma probably remembers more on top of an idea about what's queued up next. But we can share that out again.
I don't think there's any decisions that you can expect in January that you hadn't heard of yet. That's very vague and ambiguous, but I don't think you'll be making any recommendations in January. But you can all reference your work plan that you received in June, and then I think again in July or September that included the priority, and then crosswalked it with upcoming board meetings. And keep us accountable to that.
And we have a January date.
Stay in January. Yes.
I think I was thinking the 14th too. That's what I thought.
January 14th.
Okay, January 14th. I'll see y'all then. Anybody with the last word? We're adjourned. Thank you.